Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are studying Jeremiah, that's the prophet Yirmiyahu, chapter 35. We just completed before, in chapter 34, the story of the freedom that was declared to the slaves, which God viewed as a positive act, and relieved the siege of Jerusalem for a short period of time, but the people immediately reverted to their evil ways and cruelly re-enslaved their captives. And God then said, that's it, I had enough. The Babylonians came back, laid siege again. Now, this next chapter takes us back in history, a significant period of time. We flip back about 10 years or so to the days of Jehoiakim. The chapter before took place during the reign of Tzidkiyahu, who was the last final king, and it took place during the second siege of Jerusalem, which was placed by the Babylonians on Jerusalem, which ultimately ended in the destruction of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. This next chapter backs us up to the days of the king Jehoiakim, who was the son of Josiah, Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu was a righteous king who met his tragic death in a battle against the Egyptians at Megiddo. Now, and his son Jehoiakim took over. So his son Jehoiakim, in the beginning, was subservient to the Babylonians, and he also rebelled, which led to the first attack of the Babylonians against Jerusalem. In the first, but we're backing up now into the days of Jehoiakim, the days when Jehoiakim was the king. So let's start reading 35, verse 1. Hadavor asher haya el Yirmiyahu me'et Adonai. The word that came to Jeremiah from God, Bimei Jehoiakim ben Yoshiyahu, during the days of the king Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, Melech Yehuda, the king of Judah, Lamar, saying as follows. Now, the why it jumps back in time is not completely clear. We might come to some understanding of this as we go through the other chapters, but it does. And several times the chapters have jumped kind of around back and forth from different time periods in history. So here we go. Verse 2, Haloch el beit harechavim. I want you to go to the family of the Rechavim, or in English, the Rechabites or the Rechabites. This is a family who descend from a man named Rechav, and they're a family that lived a nomadic lifestyle. We'll learn a little bit more about their lifestyle in a minute. And because of this, of the onslaught and the invasion of the Babylonian army, they left the fields and the deserts where they were wandering, and came into the city Jerusalem for protection. So God says, go to their household, v'dibarto, come and speak to them, v'heveitam beit Adonai. I want you to bring that whole family to the house of God, to the temple, elachat ha'lishachot, to one of the rooms on the side of the temple, v'hishkita otam yayin. I want you to give them some wine to drink. Now, this family descended from, we're going to learn soon the name Yonadav, who was one of their ancestors. And it seems that he descended from Yethro, or Jethro, who was the father-in-law of Moses. And this family, that family converted to Judaism and joined the Jewish people. And eventually their descendants became known as this family, the Rechavim, the Rechabites. So they are a family within the nation of Judah, and God tells Jeremiah to bring them into the temple to give them some wine to drink. So Jeremiah says, "For ekach, and I took et Yaazanya, ven Yirmiyahu, ven Chavatzinya, v'et Echav, v'et Kolbanav. I went and I took this man who was a member of this family named Yaazaniah, who was the son of Jeremiah, not the same Jeremiah, just another person with that name, the son of Havatziniah, and his brothers and all of his children. Viet Kol Beit Rechavim, and the entire family of the Rechabites, of the Rechavim, I went and I brought them to the temple. V'aviotam Beit Adonai, verse 4, I brought them to the house of God, Elishkat, to the room of Bnei Chanan ben Yigdal Yahu Isha Elohim, of the children of Hanan, the son of Yigdal Yahu, who was a man of God, presumably man of God, meaning he was one of the people appointed overseeing some aspect of the temple service. Asher Eitza Lishkat Hasarim, and his room was next to the office, the room where the officers would stay, which was Asher Mimal Lishkat Ma'aseyo ben Shalom Shomer Asaf, which was above the room where Ma'aseyahu, the son of Shalom, who was the guardian of the doorway, the gatekeeper. These rooms and everything don't mean much to us, but to someone who was familiar with the temple, these markers would mean something. This would give people an idea of where this event took place. Presumably, it was in a prominent room that was, and people are going to witness what's about to happen here. And I placed before the family of the Rechabites, I placed before them a Gviim Mileim Yayin, cups full of wine, the kosot, and Gviim are like a larger kind of cup, and kosot are like a smaller kind of cup, all full of wine. I laid it all out for them. And I told them, Shasu Yayin, here, take some wine to drink. And they said, Lo nishteh yayin, we will not drink wine. We do not drink wine. Why? Ki Yonadav ben Rechav, Yonadav, who was the son of Rechav was the ancestor after whom the family was named, but his son, Yonadav, Tziva aleinu lemar, commanded us as follows: Lo tishtu yayin, you should never drink wine. Atem, not you, uvnechem, nor your children or descendants, ad olam, forever. So our family doesn't drink wine. But he also gave some other commandments. Uvayet lo tivnu, do not build homes, do not build houses. V'zera lo tizra'u, do not plant fields. In other words, don't own fields and plow them. V'kerem lo tito, don't plant vineyards. V'lo yiyeh lachem, so there should not be things that you own. You shouldn't own the properties or possessions or fields or homes and stuff like that. Ki ba'ahalim teishvu kol yimechem, I want you to live in tents your whole life. Leman tichyun, if you do this, you will then live yomim rabim al pnei adama, you will live for many years on the earth, asher atem garim sham, the land within which you live. So, v'nishma b'kol Yehonadav ben Rechav Avinu, and we listened, we have obeyed the command of Yonadav, the son of Rechav, our forefather, l'chol asher tzivanu, regarding all that he commanded us. Levilti shtot yayin kol yameinu, that we've never drink wine our entire lives. Anachnu, not us. Nashenu, not our wives. Banenu, not our sons. V'nosenu, not our daughters. Ulevilti v'nos batim l'shiftenu, we also haven't built homes for us to live in. V'kerem v'soda v'zera l'yalanu, and we don't have our vineyards, we don't have fields, we don't plant our own things, we don't have these things. Rather, v'neshev ba'halim, we live in temporary tents, we live a nomadic lifestyle. V'nishma v'na'as asher tzivanu Yonadav Avinu, and we listened, or we heeded the instructions of Yonadav, our ancestor, and we've done everything that he's commanded us. Vayehi, and it was. So why is it that now we're in the city? Why aren't we out in the fields? Because it happened that Baalot Nebuchadnezzar Melech Bavel, that when the Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came El Haaretz, to the land, Vanomer, and we said, Bo'u v'navol Yerushalayim, we said we need to go into Jerusalem mipnei chel hakastim, in order to get away from the armies of the Chaldeans, mipnei chel haram, and from the armies of the Arameans. Remember, there were all of these armies these nations were subservient to Babylon, and all contributed troops into the battle against Jerusalem, and therefore we settled in Jerusalem. That's the only reason why we're in the town now. Now, before we continue and read what the point of this story was and why God asked Yirmiyahu, the prophet, to bring them and ask them to drink wine, etc., I wanted to say a little bit about the history of this family. This family, as we said, were descendants of of Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, and this Yonadav, their ancestor, who is the one who commanded them to live this lifestyle, has an important history. If we look back in Melachim Bet, that's 2 Kings, second book of Kings, chapter 10, we have the following story. If this is going back quite a ways, we're going back a couple hundred years. So this family maintained these traditions for quite a few generations. The story that was happening at the time was the king Ahab, who was one of the most evil kings of the northern kingdom of Israel. This was during the time when there still was a northern kingdom of Israel. And Achav was evil. He was against God. He was corrupt. He was one of the worst kings of the northern kingdom. It rose up against him in rebellion a man named Jehu. Now Jehu, when he began his campaign against Achav, he did it as if he seemed like he was starting a righteous campaign to rid the nation of the corrupt leader Achav and to establish a better kingdom. While during the battles and the wars, and without going into all the details, there was a point where Jehu was riding in his chariot and he met this man, Yehonadav ben Rechab. So we're looking at verse 15 in Kings 2, chapter 10. It says that he found Yehonadav ben Rechab, this Jehu who was leading the rebellion against Achav. He found this Yehonadav, this man that we're talking about, the one who commanded his descendants not to drink wine and to live this nomadic lifestyle. He came to greet him, and he blessed him, and he said to him, Hayeshet levavcha yashar, is your heart straight? In other words, are you honest? Are you as honest with me? Are you with me in this mission? Are we together on this? Are you willing to fight with me? And Vayomer Yonadav said, yes, yesh, I am, I'm ready. And v'yesh tunat yedecha. And so the Yehu, who was not yet the king, who was leading a rebellion against the king, outstretched his hand and brought Yehonadav onto his chariot, into his carriage with him. Yehonadav was therefore became an important assistant and partner of Yehu in the campaign to rid the northern kingdom of the terrible king Achav and all of the damage that Achav had caused. And then the king said to him in verse 16, Vayomer l'cha, come with me, ure'ei b'kinasi l'Adonai, and you will see how I am vengeful for the Lord. In other words, you and I together will fight for God. He made this into a holy war to fight for God and to rid the kingdom of all the evil that Achav supported. And he even rode together with the king on his chariot. And then it says that the two of them together with the forces, with each one of them leading their own group of forces, united, and they came to Shomron, which was the capital of the northern kingdom, and they got rid of anyone else, all of the supporters of Achav. They got rid of them until they destroyed him, as God had predicted, so on. And then afterwards it says what happened in verse 18. I'm still reading 2 Kings. Yehu came and gathered the whole nation together, and he told them he wanted to weed out the supporters of Baal, the supporters of the idol Baal, and weed them out from the supporters of God. So he says, Achav, your old king, he served Baal, but he was only a little servant of Baal. I'm a real big servant of Baal. I want all of the people, all of the prophets of Baal to come so we can make a great big ceremony to honor Baal. So they gathered together. All of the worshippers of Baal gathered together, and and uh, I'm going to skip a few of these verses here. In the end, what he said: anyone that worships God is shouldn't be here. Only real true believers in Baal. And then he killed them all. So he literally cleansed the. So this was and Yonadav helped, and he did it at the time. He involved himself in this very violent activity because Yonadav honestly felt that fighting with Yehu was fighting to reestablish God's kingdom, and unfortunately, the corruption of Baal and Baal worship had become so ingrained in the northern kingdom that it was important, and unfortunately, sometimes terrible times call for terrible measures. However, it then says. And Yonadav ben Rechav joined, and so on and so forth. I'm skipping a little bit again. But then, in the end of all of this, once Yehu had supposedly cleansed them of Baal, and then Yehu was declared the king, Yonadav at his side, Yehu turned and became just as bad and just as corrupt as the one who preceded him, Achav. So you can just imagine how let down and how disappointed Yonadav was at this action. But the disappointment and the letdown of being involved in something that seemed so holy and so important, and committing such violence but doing it in the name of something holy, in the name of something important, and then seeing that the moment he becomes the king, the moment he sits in the palace, the moment he becomes corrupted by wealth, and presumably wine and all of the trappings of wealth, suddenly he becomes corrupt again. One can imagine that Yonadav then had this kind of attitude and told himself, look what happens when wealth and possessions and things like wine corrupt people. And therefore he went ahead and commanded his descendants, I want you not to build homes, not to purchase big pieces of land. In those days, that was what wealth was. You're going to live in tents. You're going to live simple lives. None of this partying with wine. None of this alcohol. I want you to live simple lives because I don't want you to become corrupted from that. Clearly, this is not the way that God commanded us to live. We know wine is part of so many rituals, and wine in moderation, in appropriate amounts, is something that there's nothing. That's not just there's nothing wrong in partaking of it. In many cases, it's actually part and parcel of the rituals, even in the temple as well. Building homes, fields, plowing fields, planting vineyards, etc. These are things, regular commerce. These are things that God expects of the people, and we see this repeatedly. So the practices of these people, the Rechabites, was not the practices of standard Judaism, so to speak. However, we can at least understand a little bit of why their ancestor established this way of living among them. So now let's continue. Let's go back to Jeremiah 35. After the episode happened, what was the point of this? Now let's see. Now that we understand these people and what just happened when they refused the wine, let's see what the point. Why did God ask Jeremiah to do this? The word of God to Jeremiah was as follows. This is verse, I'm about to read 13. So says God, the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, I want you to give it. Go out there and speak to all of the people of Judah and all of the residents of Jerusalem. Halotikhu musar. I want you to take instruction, to listen. Listen to what I'm saying and take instruction from this. L'shmo el dvarai. Listen to what I'm telling you. This is what God says. Hu kamet divrei Yonadav ben Rechav. The commands of Yonadav, the son of Rechav, the man that I was just telling you all about, has been fulfilled. Asher tziva et banav, that he commanded his children not to drink wine. V'lo shatu ad hayom hazeh, and they listened. They did not drink wine all the way till this day. Ki shamu et mitzvas avim, they listened to the command of their forefather. However, v'anochi, I, God, dibarti alechem hashkem v'daber. I have been speaking to you and persistently speaking to you. I have been sending you messages, v'lo shematem eloi, and you have not listened to me. The basics of the religion you're not listening to. They're able to create their own little sect and fulfill their own rules that was given to them by a human being, and they can stick to those rules. But you are listening to God himself give you the basic rules of this religion, and you refuse to listen. God says in verse 15, and I have been sending to you all of my servants, the prophets, every generation, there's prophet after prophet after prophet. Hashkem b'shaloach, I have been persistent and consistently sending them to you. Lamar saying as follows: Shuvu na'ish midarko hara. Please, each man, return from your evil ways. Change your ways. Ve'etivu ma'alelechem. Change your actions. Correct them. Don't go following those false gods. Love them to worship them. Ushavu el ha'adama. I want you to return and come back to the land asher natati lehem v'lavotechem, that I've given to you and your forefathers. V'lo hititem et aznechem v'lo shmatem eloi. And you haven't paid any attention to me. You haven't listened to me at all. Ki hekimu b'nei Yonadav ben Rechav et mitzvat avihem asher tzivam. The family of Yonadav, the son of Rechav, and all of his descendants, they have been able to listen to the commandments of their forefathers. But this nation still refuses to listen to me. Therefore, we find so many times that people can live customs. A sect can develop in a religion where people are able to keep the customs that they think are important, the ones that they received from their father or received from his father, that might go back 2 generations, 5 generations, 10 generations. And people can stick to them and create their group and keep those things but these things are just trappings. The bottom line, the real thing, the most important thing, the things that God teaches us, tzedek u'mishpat, justice and righteousness, we tend to forget about. This is the message of this chapter. Lachein, therefore, verse 17, Kol amar Adonai Elohei tzavos elei Yisrael, so says God, the Lord of hosts, the Lord of Israel. And Yehuda vel kol yoshvei Yisrael, and because you refuse to listen to me, I'm going to bring upon Judah, and I'm going to bring upon the residents of Jerusalem, at kol hara'ah, all of the punishment, asher dibarti aleim, that I have spoken regarding them. Yam dibarti aleim lo shemeu, because I have spoken to them, delivered them messages, but they did not listen to them. I have called out to them, I have instructed them, below anu, but they have not answered me. And to the family of the Rechavim, the Rechabites, Yirmiyahu said, as they were standing there by the temple, so says God, the Lord of Israel, because you were faithful, to the commands of Yonadav, your forefather, and you have done as he has commanded you. Therefore, this is the verse 19. Therefore, also says God, the Lord of Israel, for all generations, for all eternity, for all of history, there will always be descendants of this family of Yonadav, the son of Rechav. There will always be descendants of the Rechabites standing before me, before God, worshiping me and serving me for all days, for all time. Thank you so much for paying attention and studying with me chapter 35. Looking forward to studying chapter 36 and the entire book of Jeremiah together.